All right, today on Ship Chasing, no roasts. Although, who knows? Maybe we'll find someone to roast by the end of the show. No, we are going to start to pivot our mindset a little from best ball brain to redraft managed leagues. If you guys are like us, we are starting to set our eyes on some of our high stakes leagues. Obviously, these involve waivers and trades in an entirely different set of ways to think about winning. So we're going to kind of discuss through some of those. Also, we'll compare some of the underdog ADP to some of the high stakes ADP as well and see where things might be varying because of those format differences. So this is Ship Chasing with Pete, Ben, and Pat. Let's do it.
Pat Fryer Helmo.
This is why I'm hot.
Anita Handjob.
Fix your site. Jamar. Alpha play chase. Are you kidding me? Kadarius Toney?
You can't handle the heat.
It looks like we're finally this boys. You're right.
Oh, what am I doing? Where are we at here? I got to get Pat on stage. Does this do it? Does that? There he is.
Yeah.
Now we're good.
Always shows up right before the intro.
It's pretty good, right? It's a good trick.
It's a good bit.
Yeah, slightly earlier
like
start time. I got a 18-month checkup appointment for April here later this afternoon. So I appreciate everyone accommodating me. We also just need to do a little postmortem on last week's roast show that ended up being a mega hit.
Sparked a beef.
It sparked a beef that trickled over to Twitter posts, Twitter videos, back and forth on ADP chasing, on Swolecast. Pretty incredible.
I love that. We literally pulled up a picture of Davis's stream, roasted it, and that wasn't the beef that was started. Beef was actually between Kitchen and JJ.
Incredible stuff. We might have to, I mean, our schedule is going to obviously get pretty busy here with all of our draft streams and stuff, but man, we might have to make time for one more. Maybe we could do like a late night or like an after party after one of the draft streams and roast some teams at some point.
That would be very good. That'd be very good.
Steph is the only person in the world who gets excited for waivers.
Stoked, yeah.
We last year, for people who don't know, we tapped Stephanie to be point guard on all of our waivers across all of our leagues. It made not only the teams better, it made our lives better. It improved our relationships, our morale, our relationships with God. It basically just had an entire 180.
It has been elevating everything. Yeah. Talk about a rising tide.
Yeah.
Definitely is the rising tide.
So, Steph, hopefully you're going nowhere this year, because otherwise, no more redraft leagues for us.
Yeah, otherwise it's best ball only. Never going back.
But yeah, I thought it would be fun to kind of talk through both like specific players and ADP stuff, but also kind of macro things, because it is really hard to turn off your best ball brain. Like even Gretch, I've been listening to your guys' great projection pod with Leone and seeing year over year how much like best ball stuff then even leads into that. And it's like, it's not bad. It's just like, it's so omnipresent in how we talk about fantasy football now that it is kind of hard to switch it up.
Well, I mean, we talked about last season how it was sort of burying dynasty, and I think it definitely did bury dynasty for like the key way we talk about fantasy in the off season. Like 5-10 years ago, that was there was best ball back then, but it was still like, dynasty and all that. But we spend most of the off season structuring the way that we talk about fantasy football as a hobby around best ball, like a lot of time, right? It's not the Pat just took himself off the stream. He's like nodding along and then he's gone. But yeah, I mean, like there's a lot of time and a lot of conversations baked around that exact topic. So, I mean,
I've just finished and filed a piece for Fantasy Life. And even the differences between what we're going to mainly be focused on with like high stakes ADP, over on FFPC is really different from the ESPN and Yahoo ADPs. Obviously you got the tight end premium difference, but like, over on, FFPC, like the rookies are going to be, slightly less than they are on Underdog, but still like, decently valued. Whereas on ESPN, they're just like complete afterthoughts. Like Malik Neighbors is going in like the 6th or 7th round of ESPN drafts right now. So even that like is something you have to consider if people are gearing up for home leagues with buddies.
Yeah, the environments are very different. And then as Underdog moves more and more towards receiver, that is only going to get more and more different, because I don't expect that a lot of these other formats, a lot of these other platforms will move in that direction as aggressively. So they're just like, the pockets of the draft and how, which players you have to prioritize when starts to get more and more different. That's putting aside the differences that you want to be thinking about because of the format.
So what are the things like top of your mind right now? I feel like the one thing that always I think is the trickiest for us is we know with the redraft stuff, we want to take the biggest possible swings, like specifically at the onesies as well, because we know the safety net is there for the waiver wire. The difference between like what's going to be the tight end 12 and the guy we get on the waivers isn't going to be that great. But if we hit on Sam Laporta, that's going to supercharge our teams. I think the thing we always have to balance is sometimes we go so many rookies because they are often the best pick in every round, but then that can lead to sputtering starts and like balancing that dynamic of wanting to swing for the fences, but knowing like, yeah, we are going to need sub early season production as well.
That's definitely part of it. I think, thinking through like the best ball profile, to some extent, kind of, prioritizing like in a weird way, we talk about better in best ball type of stuff, but in a weird way, like it's those kind of more steady profiles, especially at running back, that I'm more interested in best ball, and are also cheaper on Underdog than they will be on FFPC. So like, I don't know, like, Alvin Kamara, I don't like taking even on Underdog, but like if he falls and I need a running back and I'm like, he's going to help fill weeks, sure. But I just pulled up on Fantasy Mojo, I pulled up the Fantasy Pros Championship ADP. Kamara's going at pick 52. Like,
yeah, middle of the fifth round.
Just absolutely not. Like I don't care about like filling weeks at running back in redraft. Whereas like there is some value to filling weeks in best ball. You don't get the waiver wire. You don't get to, change your team in any way. So just having a dude on there who's going to play a lot of weeks, I still think it was a terrible pick, but Fareed had Alexander Madison on his winning roster. Like you can get away with kind of these week filling running back selections in best ball in a way I think you really, really want to avoid drafting like that in managed, and they tend to be more expensive in managed. So that makes it easier to avoid them. Yeah.
When you brought up this topic, Pete, I mean, I was like, I'm just going to be playing the hits with anything that I talk about on this episode. Like what Pat just said, like it's running back dead zone. It's all that stuff.
But we get the dead zone back, Ben. It's back.
The dead zone is very much back. I don't want to draft any dead zone backs in managed. I think for all the reasons you just said, you can make exceptions in best ball, but it's still difficult to take those picks in best ball. When we just did our show a couple of weeks ago about the players that we're afraid of not having a lot of exposure to, we all picked running backs from that range, right? Like, or at least one. We were like, there's some guys here that we can't really get to structurally, but I think you can justify some of those picks in best ball for the reasons you said. You can't replace the running backs on the waiver wire. You can't do the Frankenstein running back thing as easily throughout the season. You can't have that revolving door. Your roster is stuck. And so the small win type running back is way better in best ball. It is way more viable. The whatever it is, like I think Isaiah Pacheco is probably a small win at best, or Josh Jacobs. Or, I mean, you said Alvin Kamara, any of those guys, but I'd go even to higher profile guys in Kamara as examples where that type of production, maybe not super replaceable. I still think it's probably replaceable in best ball this year, but in managed, like it's so much more replaceable. Like, cause you can actually play the waiver wire. And the argument I made in a recent write-up that we talked about a little last week, and Sean and I on Stealing Bananas did a big breakdown of the dead zone this week in a couple different episodes. The argument that I've made in a couple of those places is it's the same idea of, because there aren't as many running backs going high, it's pushing down the value for the 0RB types. But that there are so many offenses where we're not even like they're gonna have running back points where we're not even drafting the first running back until the double-digit rounds. And there's some good ones. The Denver backfield, the Chargers backfield, the Cowboys are a really good fast-paced offense that are going to score touchdowns. Their backfield, the Browns backfield because of Nick Chubb. there's definitely going to be running back points from the double-digit rounds. So when you think about how you're going to be able to replace this stuff in a managed league, when you're able to actually see what happens with Nick Chubb, see what happens with Zeke and Dowdle and that stuff, maybe you want to take shots on those types of players because you can cut them. Like, I would actually be more open to taking a Zeke in a managed league. Like, I don't know, maybe he looks spry in the first couple of weeks. Probably not, but you can at least cut him if he doesn't.
I'm less interested in taking Zeke because I'm just like, I don't know. He's going to catch like 6 passes one week and it'll hit my lineup and I don't have to think about it.
But to Ben's point, if you got the Zeke on the Pats down the stretch last year to open up the season on
That's
a
the point
really
I'm saying,
true
yeah.
0 RB squad, you would just be doing cartwheels.
What if he hits a 20
those
touch
catches?
outcome this year? There's scenarios where it's him or Dowdle is like a 20 touch back, or at least.
See, I'm already very interested in Dowdle, but like, so what's interesting is Zeke in this ADP, he's at 10.9, which is a little bit above. Dowdle's at 12.3, which I think is pretty close, or at least that's kind of like where I take him. So maybe it's a little ahead, but you're getting, I think you get sometimes the upside doesn't get priced up as much as the projected touches. And so, which I love, because then you can take bigger cracks on the upside, which is what you want. So the thing you want more in the format is sometimes cheaper than the thing you don't
Zeke
want.
was a really bad point. The point was the backfields that don't have any running backs that are going high and that are going to have points in the backfield. The running back scoring pie for Dallas is going to be large.
It's going to be large. Yeah, I agree.
And we don't know. I mean, it might not be the highest in the overall league. I think the Broncos might be up there. The Browns and the Chargers might be up there. So those are better examples. Kamani Vidal is a better example for this point. Like, if you hit on that, he could be the starter.
Yeah,
like, he could be the stud.
Vidal's a good one.
Know,
really good one.
Yeah, and if he's Rashad Penny, he's gone.
So we know this from years of doing the so like Vidal, right? Vidal goes in the 150s on Underdog. He's at 139 here. J.K. Dobbins goes one pick behind him. He goes I think he's in like the 170s on Underdog. So
here, let me pull this up.
Yeah.
I have the grid from Rotoviz here.
One thing we know from doing these drafts over the years is that they're more running back heavy in terms of when the running backs go early, but they're also more running back heavy in terms of how many running backs people take. So you can't just like sit back in the pocket and wait for running backs to be there for you in round 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Like if you just want to like hit running back real hard in that pocket, they will be there for you in 8 and 9 and maybe 10. And then it's like potentially over, or you're already moving to like a different type of bet.
When you look at this visual, the 6th round, Aaron Jones, Zamir White, and James Conner are all going ahead of Keenan Allen. Like that's very different. That's very different.
The other thing, going back to Ben's point about like small wins, is so small wins are the opposite outcome for players who are either small wins or small losses. And small losses in redraft often fall into the bucket of roster cloggers, or Pat's call them the silent killer. That's actually the most terrifying thing. And it's why like 0 RB and redraft is kind of nice, because a lot of times your team is so starved for production that a small loss can still serve its utility for you at running back, where you're like, I'll take those 7.5 points from Nyheim Hines on this team where I'm loaded everywhere else. But if you have that balanced roster with a bunch of small wins, small losses, like they're not good enough to start, but they're not bad enough to cut. And then you're just in this like paralyzed like cycle of not being able to chase the good stuff on the waiver wire, because you know you have zero certainties at any positions in your roster.
And I think that's also an argument for someone in the chat mentioned elite onesies. This is another part of the like dead zone conversation. In managed, it's harder to replace elite onesies that hit. In, you know, like I understand the best ball argument of like, oh, I can take 3 quarterbacks and I can all the spike weeks hit my lineup and I can create a facsimile of an elite quarterback's production, or if I really get lucky. And you know, people think you can do that at tight end as well. I think it's harder at tight end personally, but the fact that you can just plug in Jalen Hurts every single game matters more in managed. And certainly I think it's true for the elite tight ends as well. And so then you get back to thinking about like, well, what can I do through the first 7 rounds of a draft? Like if I'm taking a detour, I mean, I'm still willing to take the elite legendary upside type running backs in the first 2 rounds, right? But
you got to pay up for him. Bijan's going 103.
Yeah, it's crazy. But if I'm taking a detour in 3, 4, 5, like it's not going to be Rachaad White in round 4, guys. Like I can't. I mean, if it's not a receiver because I hate the pocket, I'm not taking Rachaad White over Stephon Diggs, which we're looking at here. But if I'm not taking a receiver for whatever reason, then I'd rather the detour was Josh Allen QB1, or if it's a little bit earlier, one of those tight ends. Or George Kittle or whatever if you're in the 4th round. But like once you get 4, 5, 6, like I don't know how you can ever justify those running back picks.
And that's why, like, looking at this board here, audio listeners, apologies, but on the video we have the draft grid. This is all, it's pulling in main event and Football Guys drafts, ADP, so a good kind of representation of the landscape. To me, it makes rounds 2 and 3 kind of the sweet spot to get one of your detours. Obviously, you got the elite tight ends all going here. You also have backs like JT, Kyron, Achane, I'll include Gibbs there since he's at the 1-2 turn. And then you look at the round 4 wide receivers. Those are all the round 3 wide receivers on Underdog. Debo, Neighbors, Metcalf, Devontae, DJ. So it's like
Debo is like a round 2. Like he's like he's the 208, right? Like,
so to me, it is like knowing how that stuff works. Like I think I'm probably going to end up wanting one of the tight ends or an elite running back out of round 2 or 3 in most of these drafts.
I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, you're able to get, a bunch of receivers, like there's no way on Underdog that you could get Justin Jefferson, Marvin Harrison in like Jalen Waddle or something like that. Right. Or, that you could get Jamar Chase, Chris Olave, and Nico Collins.
True.
Like that's pretty exciting to me.
That is exciting, but then do the 2v2s with because round 8 you're going to want to take JSN and Xavier Worthy, right? Round 7 you're going to want to take Jaden Reed. Round 9 you're getting Roma Doomsday.
But I think round 7 Jaden Reed versus round 3 Jalen Waddle. I want round 3 Jalen Waddle.
Yeah.
Well,
but think about how we've been talking about round 2 and 3 wide receivers, where it's like order them however you want. You can make a case for Marvin Harrison there. You can make a case for Neighbors there, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, okay, am I going to take Marvin Harrison off the board here? Or am I going to grab McBride or Kincaid?
Yeah, it's the 2v2
Kelsey,
thing.
McBride. That's the tight end, I think, is pretty enticing here, where FFPC, we don't normally just see no tight ends in the first round. And then kind of like, oh, yeah, I guess we'll grab a few in the second round. Like the tight end detour is pretty exciting to me in the second round. I do agree with that.
I like your point. I think every path in the first couple rounds seems appealing because it does seem appealing to get an anchor running back when you're like, I definitely don't want to be taking him in the dead zone. Obviously, the elite tight end is appealing. And I think that the receiver point you just made is very appealing. The question for me is then, what do you want to be doing from 4 through 9? And like, to me, it's just like, I don't want to be doing anything but drafting those receivers. Like if my question is Rachaad White versus DJ Moore, Stephon Diggs, if it's Zamir White versus Keenan Allen, if it's, Tyjae Spears versus Xavier Worthy at that point, like I want to we get the rookies at the old rookie prices, like the Justin Jefferson rookie year, Garrett Wilson rookie year stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I think
Rome's in round 9, like
Rome's in 9. One of the things that I think
in round 9. We did this before.
One of the things I think is happening this year is there's a lot of people emphasizing that the dead zone hit last year, and they just think the dead zone doesn't exist anymore, and they're not paying attention to the years of data prior that show why the dead zone existed. And my main response to that, because I've gotten these comments on Twitter, my main response is like, well, I mean, I don't know what to tell you other than I was saying that we should be drafting running backs in the dead zone last year. We were saying on the show, we did it on all our builds. It was really effective last year. And it's because of the profiles that were in the dead zone. The hits out of the dead zone historically from back when I did that research initially are rookie second-year players that the market doesn't understand like what they are yet from a longer view profile perspective.
Or guys like Pollard who are flashing a bit high-end talent, but they're in split backfields.
Right. He can be, but like it's guys that will be first rounders the next year. Breece Hall and Jahmyr Gibbs were unique dead zone options last year. Travis Etienne fit that as well. He's still, like he's somewhere in between now, but he hit in a pretty big way. And there were other names there too, Javonte, James Cook, et cetera, that didn't necessarily hit in the same way. That group that we had last year was unique. That's not what the profiles in the dead zone this year are. I just want to emphasize that. Just because the data says that round 4 or 5 running backs hit last year doesn't change the fact that we have a lot of dead zone information from prior years, and that last year's profiles in the dead zone were very unique. They're not unique like that this year. It's very different.
The other thing
Pacheco's
too
a
is
little
like,
bit. I'm torn up with Pacheco because he's on such a good offense and he has no competition. He is dead zoney in certain ways, but what's your thought on him as a dead zone
I think
back?
he's actually pretty dead zoney because
Okay.
it truly is rookies or second year guys. And if the idea is we don't know how good the player is yet. We've got 2 year sample from Pacheco, and I think the market knows how good he is, and the market's saying the situation's fantastic, and we're going to draft him high because of guaranteed volume and no backup and all of these things, but we don't trust him enough to push him into the second or the first. That's when you get the market telling you that we actually think this player adds efficiency to a situation and he's a superstar. The market is telling you when they leave him in round 3 in this and in round 4 and 5 and the other stuff, they don't think he adds to his situation. And we have a big enough sample after 2 years. He would surprise me. He could be like the Josh Jacobs where the efficiency takes another step up. But his efficiency has been good, by the way, as well. But I think that's largely because of how
it's been good, not amazing.
The thing I would say too, and I agree, you can certainly make the case for just hammering wide receiver, but like, I know kind of the path that puts us down, and it's a fun path. It involves a ton of Brock Bowers. It involves a ton of Jaden Daniels. It involves a ton of 0 RB teams. But I do want to have like some of those 2v2s. Like looking at this board here, like, yes, can you have Nico Collins and Brock Bowers? Like, yeah, that sounds very fun. But I also want to have a Mark Andrews, Keenan Allen. You know, like I want to flip those and play some of those pockets. And it's just like after round 2 and 3, and we're going to want to have some George Kittle too. Like this price looks exploitable here in the 5th round relative to some of these other guys. I mean, going well after Evan Ingram. So I think we just want to play around with it a bit because there's so many fun ways to attack this.
The chat's asking what board is this. I guess I'm not entirely sure. I know it's FFPC. Is it the Fantasy Pros or the early main events?
I have it on Fantasy Pros and main event for this is on RotoViz. They have a draft grid here and just an easy way to kind of display this.
So this is managed leagues on FFPC, 2 running back, 2 receiver, 2 flex, tight end premium. And the running backs are getting pushed up. Even with the premium tight ends, the running backs are getting pushed up because the tight ends are getting pushed up too. I mean, Jake Ferguson's a 5th round pick in this format.
So the running backs, you know, obviously I like Jaylen Warren a lot. Jonathan Brooks, I like a lot. They're not that much more expensive than they are on Underdog. Whereas a lot of the guys, you know, a lot of the pocket there is priced up significantly. Like Zamir White is in the 6th, James Conner in the 6th, Aaron Jones in the 6th, Ramondre Stevenson starts the 6th. So we said Kamara's in the 5th. But like there are a few running backs in that kind of sweet spot here that I think are very strong targets. Javante's still going pretty late.
That's cheap.
In the 9th, that's pretty nice. So I think you probably do want to hit running back a couple times. You want to be more selective, but hit it a couple times. I still like Brian Robinson in the 8th, 9th. You know, in this format, I actually think there's more upside there.
Yeah, anytime you could take Brian Robinson over the guy who 1 pick ahead of the guy who broke the combine 40 record and plays with Patrick Mahomes, and they traded up in the 1st round to draft him. I mean, I would definitely take Brian Robinson.
That's not something I would argue for, but but I do think like there's some guys here with profiles that I'm like, this feels pretty good for the price. But yeah, it's just going to be like the opportunity cost at wide receiver just is going to feel harder, you know, more costly in like every round is really because they're just not priced up as high.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, and that's what's going to be really hard. Like round 8 does seem like really hard. I mean, this is such a sick spot for these running backs. You got Jaylen Warren, Zach Moss, Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, Brian Robinson. You have Xavier Worthy, JSN, Jordan Addison, and then we probably will not necessarily be in on the tight ends in this range, but that is like, you're going to feel the push pull of like, man, I really like these wide receivers. Same with the 9th, Rome, Brian Thomas, but then you're looking at Trey Benson, Blake Corum, Javonte. Like I feel like those are going to be the ones that put us in a blender where you're like, I wish we had 3 picks in this.
Well, round. You know, I have thought about this on Underdog where I'm drafting a lot of teams that, and Jacob Sanderson had a really good article a couple days ago where he was kind of making the devil's advocate case that maybe we are overvaluing wide receiver, even though he doesn't really fully believe that. But like, what if we are? How should we play it? And kind of making the case for like more builds. At least the way my takeaway from it was like, I'm probably not doing enough builds that are like just kind of classic zero running back builds, but where I just like hit running back as hard as I would have if I didn't love the profiles and play to have running back more in the flex. So, I've got like 5 running backs round like, 7 to 11 or whatever. And that idea has made me feel like, God, if I do that, I end up with a lot of profiles that aren't kind of traditional zero running back profiles. They're very like touch-based profiles.
Almost dead zone.
They're dead zone. They're cheap. They're cheap dead zone backs.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be more fun just because the way I like to do things? Wouldn't I have more fun going like with some of these more chaotic, anti-fragile running back profiles? And maybe this is how we do that. We're like, what if we go like true zero running back here with like a Charbonnet? Honestly, I'm back in on Zeke. Is your Zeke point? Now I'm in. You could get.
I was never in. I was saying even Zeke could fit.
Yeah,
I was never in. I want to be clear.
Ty Chandler, Rico Dowdle, Marshawn Lloyd, right? Like these are the profiles that zero running back was sort of built on. Vidal,
some
Ray
standalone
Davis.
And some upside is kind of what you're
yeah.
These profiles are still pretty cheap. Like you could start in round 10 and tack on probably 3 of them through like round 12.
Yeah, I mean, I've not been big on Ja'Lynn McLaughlin's ability to actually get a large workload, but he to me is going to have some standalone value.
Yeah, I agree. I like McLaughlin.
Yeah. He's back in the day, like Pete just mentioned Naheem Hines a little bit. Back in the day, we do those receiving backs. They don't really exist as much anymore, but he's that kind of profile where I don't think there's the huge ceiling. I do think he's startable to get you to the anti-fragile bets, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, like, I actually, as much as I like a couple guys in that range, especially like Warren and Brooks to me would be like guys I actually would be willing to take over some of the wide receiver upside. I promise you now, I will not try to get us to take Brian Robinson over Xavier Worthy. I'm not going to do it.
Okay.
Don't worry. Like I'm much more interested in saying, let's take Xavier Worthy as like our wide receiver 7.
Yeah.
And
I usually don't like going as wide receiver deep, but I like this point. And then Pete's point about not liking or being in a bind in round 8, but also not liking the tight ends. It made me even want to do the elite tight end idea even more, because I was like, yeah, I mean, I definitely want to be taking a running back or a receiver in that range versus one of these tight ends, or like especially, the Ferguson or like Njoku prices in round 6. Like I don't want to be making that tight end pick or feeling like we have to because we don't have a tight end yet. That was the reminder when you said that, Pete, that we always talk about, that it's not just in FFPC the elites are pushed up. It's also that like round 10 tight ends are way costlier. Everything is costlier at tight end. And we still are seeing a thing here where there's not even a first round tight end. And I would argue these are first round tight end premium profiles. But again, because there's 7 of them, you get them in the second and third. Like we used to think it was so cheap to get like Pitts or Mark Andrews at the 2-3 turn when they were like the tight end 2, tight end 3 those years. But because there's 7 of them, like Kyle Pitts is going at the end of the 3rd round in this. Like that is appealing to me. Like
that's very appealing. Yeah.
I want to build that way.
Yeah.
And looking at this, like I think my dream start, if I could draw it up, give me the 2 hole here. Give me CeeDee Lamb. Give me one of these tight ends, Andrews or Kincaid. Give me Achane in the early 3rd. I'll come back and I'll grab Flowers. I'll come back and I'll grab T. Higgins. I will come back and I'll grab Jaden Reed. I'll grab Rashee Rice. I'll grab Xavier Worthy. I'll grab Brian Thomas or Roma Dunze.
See, I think I throw in Richardson there. Richardson's just available in the late 6th. I think I would grab him like over Jaden Reed and then push. Because we know we're getting like Worthy and Rome. Like, I mean, like take those guys over Reed,
We're gonna
the other thing then you start to kind of go with the stacking stuff of like, oh, maybe you could also take Dak in the 9th, maybe Dak falls to the 10th. You can get Jaden Daniels. But I just like looking at these running backs, like the Achane seems like the best price to me.
Best price. Yeah, because he's cheaper than on Underdog. I mean, Sanderson's
he's the last one worth drafting.
Yeah. I mean, obviously he's great in all formats. Like he's, I guess, going to be a little bit more volatile, but like, and so therefore better in best ball. Like he will be more volatile and I guess then better in best ball, but like he's going to be, his ceiling is so high that you just lock him in. You put him in.
There's a certain thing on the volatility when it's a player that you're just going to start every week anyway.
It doesn't matter.
It's better in best ball, but he's still going to hit your lineup. It's not like he's going to miss your lineup and managed, right?
Right. Yeah, like the amount of points you're leaving on the table like isn't that many probably.
Right.
Yeah. Especially relative to what other people are doing. You know, like what?
Yeah.
It's not like you're going against best ball rosters.
I like that note, Pete. I and you guys have advocated for this on FFPC since I first joined you guys back in. I mean, I started doing this stuff in late 2020, so we were doing the 2021 draft season about the idea of getting an anchor running back and an early tight end in the first 3 rounds, and then kind of hammering receiver in the dead zone. It feels like getting back to that structure this year as well. Whether it's Achane or it's
this is making me so happy. Just going back to stuff we can just hammer wide receiver again. For real?
If you get in a room where Chase or Amon-Ra or Jefferson end up going a little higher, Bijan falls to 106, 107. I want to kind of jump on that. Yeah, yes. And then hit on McBride in the second round, and then just go, all right, I'm gonna piss yellow now for 6 or 7 rounds. That sounds awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
And then you can still keep yourself open to Jonathan Brooks slides 3 picks or 4 picks past. You know what?
Yep.
We still, there's some wide receivers we like. Okay, let's do a 2v2. Because if you do just rip the 9 straight or whatever, then it's you can't really take Ja'Lynn Polk. I mean, you can, but you're going to need running back.
You definitely
darts here.
can, yeah.
But I'm saying I would want to play some of those 2v2s of no, let's also grab Jonathan Brooks here because we know that we can arbitrage some of this with a Polk pick later.
There's some running back profiles that are worth taking. I think another one I'd be more interested in is another guy who's played 2 years. And the reason I think of it a little different than Pacheco, it's Kenneth Walker, is that I think he's held back by committee talk, whereas Pacheco's price is clearly not held back by any other teammate. You know what I mean? So the fact that the market is capped on how high they're willing to push him and they don't see him as a first or second rounder speaks to his profile. Walker, I think it speaks more to workload, which has traditionally been one of those dead zone.
Yeah, although his efficiency was straight up bad last year.
Yeah, it's really boom bust. I mean, I think he still hits for big runs if you look at it that way.
He does, but his success rate's been bad for 2 straight years.
Success rate, yeah.
His rush yards over expected was negative, I believe, last year.
But just in terms of hitting on something that can be explosive efficiency wise,
he can definitely hit long runs.
Yeah,
there's no doubt
he has the potential for that. But yeah, Brooks is the other better example, I think, in that range. But I'm totally open to detouring for running backs that have real ceiling, right? Real scoring ceiling.
And I love that, Zamir White is someone I've been taking actually way more than I thought I would, because he's kind of a thin resume, not that great of a prospect on a bad team, 2-down profile. I'm not taking that guy, but he's available around pick 90 half the time. Yeah. So I'm actually, is my running back 2 or running back 1 cool? But
it's ultimately if he just plays the 17 games and doesn't lose the work on a skill based, and it stays healthy. If he actually just plays, he's a hit there. He doesn't have to be good. Yeah,
yeah, he can just. So I love that. No, he's in the 6th round. You got to pay for it. I don't want to pay for it at all.
There's no way we're drafting.
No. So, but I love that. Other people are having to pay for that production, that volume. It's just nice. It's just nice. It makes it so much, more difficult to be this profile that I'm used to fading. You actually, in best ball, because of the way the format works, it's a more difficult profile to fade, period. And then it's so cheap that it's actually I think this is a target now. So back to here, I have no interest in profiles like White, but I like that our opponents are going to have to pay up for it.
Right.
What do you guys think of this question as far as the best ball to manage shift? Lawrence says, how do discounted guys like Rashee and Addison need to be valued, or how much do they need to be discounted with the uncertainty in the 12-week regular season, which again is a big difference here. And we've talked about fast starts a lot. And if you're a little too cute with, building late season monsters, you might not get those teams to the dance.
That's a great point, but also you also have to keep in mind that when you get the team to the dance, it's a very top heavy structure. It's not much different than everything we talk about in best ball. So now the difference is if you win your league, you get a nice little payout. You want to do well in the regular season. That's going to be a big way that you can turn a profitability in these leagues. To me, it's totally dependent on the texture of for those are receivers. It's totally dependent on the texture of your build so far and the texture of your receiver room. If you
how many rookies have you taken?
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
If you feel that you're not back weighted very much, then I think you need to, then you're going after back weighted production with Rashee Rice. I think Rashee Rice is a really compelling pick in this format, as long as it's not hurting you too much for the reasons that Lawrence alluded to.
People also do think about that that regular season, that short regular season, a lot. Like you'll hear about that it's a reason that people are actually falling in drafts. So and Rice here is going in the 7th. He's making an attack on the 5th round right now on Underdog. So you are getting.
He might not get suspended. If there's
possible.
still like some possibility that he might not get suspended, in which case he's a fucking smash in the 7th round.
Absolute smash. Yeah.
I do think that's there is a big difference in knowing, what was it, the year DeAndre Hopkins was suspended the first 6 games, like knowing that concretely versus like you could be free rolling a non-suspension. That is very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
And
don't talk
ADPs
about risk
really
in those ways, but like it's important to think about non-injury related, non-teammate related, non-football related risk in probabilistic range of outcomes ways. Like there's upside here in the uncertainty.
Yeah. And on the FFPC, ADPs will change dramatically, and people just don't care about ADP like they do on Underdog. So if Rice, if we get something like his suspension is very likely pushed to 2025, then he'll just like the next day go in the 3rd round.
Right. You'll never get him in the 7th round.
Yeah. It's not like he'll creep up. Like he'll just go where like he's supposed to go, like immediately. Like that's just the way it tends to work. Especially like, if we were to get that news, in main event season in Vegas, people just do whatever they want. There's no like using the ADP is like, oh, this is 6 spots ahead. Should I? No, it doesn't really work like that. They don't give a shit.
To your point, like after the Thursday night football game is played, like any player in Thursday night football is going to move 6 rounds one direction or the other.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. That's 1 week in week 1. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pete, can
you pull up this Mike Robb comment and can we? What is this?
Mike Robb says, Pat, I heard a rumor that last time you saw Liam, you gave him the too small hand gesture and mouthed too small son to him as your security opened the door to your personal SUV.
I mean, if that's just made up, that's fantastic.
That's just completely made up. Yeah.
If it said Tesla, then we would have been on to something.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Great fan fiction. I like
it. I mean, it's very funny, but complete fiction.
While I think of it, we'll have some more announcements soon about our streaming schedule for August. That'll include flipping back to some night streams for drafts. I don't even know if we've like publicly announced it. We will be in Vegas for those drafts at the beginning of the season. We're still figuring out kind of what we're going to do for Ship Chasing Meetup. We do have the back-to-back games, the Thursday night game and now the Friday night game. We'll have some more details about that. We'll also have details for the Ship Chaser VIPs. We'll have some co-manager opportunities. Again, we'll be circulating a form to gauge interest for that. But just some things to put on your radar. We're getting our ducks in a row for all of that coming up.
Very exciting. I'm psyched to get out to Vegas.
Are you gonna drive or just fly the personal plane?
So
the private plane.
Last year I did take. Now it's a commercial thing that comes out of the San Diego airport, but I didn't know I was doing this because I booked it through the Chase portal with like points, and there was only one direct flight available, and it was JetBlue, so I booked it, and it was more expensive than usual, but I booked it kind of late, so I was like, this is what I get. I waited too long. It turns out it was actually I think JSX is the line, but it's a private plane.
Oh god.
Wow.
How rich. He's accidentally booking private. It's a little more expensive.
Not like private
flights.
There was like 20 people on it, It wasn't like
but it wasn't all rows of seats. It was like there was like a different setup, I'm assuming.
No,
There's
it was
two-
basically just a small plane. It wasn't like, yeah, it was like
there weren't leather seats. I'd like to
No.
bet. What I was going to say is there's two types of best ball touts. The one that buys the wrong flight to the wrong city on their way to Vegas, and the one that buys the personal jet.
That's true.
On the way.
Now,
Those are the two types.
The big thing is that you don't go. You just show up at like the private plane that's so cool. No, it's basically like it's closer to a puddle jumper than like a cool plane. But you don't go through security. You just show up at the hangar and they're like, all right, cool. That I did enjoy quite a bit.
It is good.
Yeah.
Did they search you at all or anything?
No. You just get on the plane.
Just whatever you want to bring on the plane, you can.
It's like 1960, bro. They come with drinks and stuff on the plane.
You can just
Pat
pay more
literally
money
had like
to
a
get on-
6-foot bong like on his shoulder like a log as he walked on.
I stopped. Because you walk up. There's no like tunnel little thing you go through. You walk up the stairs to the plane, on the asphalt. And so right at the top of the stairs, I just lit that bong up, just surveyed the scene.
Gave a wave like a president.
Blew out the smoke. It's like, all right, we can take off now.
What do you guys think? We haven't talked a ton about the quarterback prices. I know Pat just mentioned the Anthony Richardson. You got Josh Allen in round 4. I'm still looking at this FFPC ADP. Hurts, Mahomes, Lamar in round 5. A-Rich in 6, Stroud in 7. Then you go all the way down to 9, where you get Burrow, Kyler, Dak, Love, and then Jaden Daniels in round 11. What do you guys think about the QB landscape?
Interesting.
I mean,
I think you can make a compelling case to pay up and go after something. I think you can make a compelling case to wait with those prices for sure. Like there's some good options there in that 9 to 11 range. That QB window is alive and well too.
We've seen Mahomes pay off in a big way this exact ADP. Like 2 years ago, we did this and he was a smash. Hurts in the 5th, Allen in the 4th, Lamar coming off an MVP season. Looks like he falls to the 6th pretty regularly. Richardson in the 6th, 7th. Like this quarterback upside does seem underpriced. Then I'd probably want to. Then the market kind of dictates that. Then there's like a tier basically until like the 9th-ish. But like I don't know, Kyler seems pretty decently priced at the 8-9.
Love his price.
Yeah, Daniels in the 10th is pretty nice.
Love his price.
I mean, so you want to talk about the difference between like best ball and redraft? Like Daniels is definitely a target for me in best ball, but not someone I'm like super excited about. And in part, it's because like this dude takes on hits. Yeah. And I'm like, man, I really don't want. I'm drafting 2 quarterbacks probably with a Daniels build, maybe 3, but in a 2 quarterback build, if Daniels is getting hurt, for even 4 or 5 games, that's really going to hurt me.
I love this point. We also don't know how much the offense is going to work like towards his running. If we see him in week 1 run 8 times, you're like, oh, that's right. So anyway, finish your point.
But no, I mean, so Daniels is like, he has the profile where you're very set and forget starter, could really pay off. If he were to miss a few games and we like pick up off the waiver wire, like, Drake May maybe, or even like, you can get Deshaun Watson in the 16th. You can get
I'm so excited to say
Will
You literally
Levis
can think of another example of a later QB. Like they don't even exist in Pat's brain.
The grin in his
like Drake May, maybe
smiling through his eyes to say his name.
Bo Nix. You could Bo Nix off the waiver wire. It's like it's very easy. Like, why would you like? And this is sometimes I feel like in redraft people are more worried about the injury risk than less. But like, who cares? Like, if Jaden Daniels gives us 6 awesome weeks and then we got to go figure out quarterback again, like, okay, that's fine. In the 10th round, that's totally fine.
He's such a compelling play. The other 2 names I would give in the late 12th are, I think you're going to get a little bit more mobility as I went through my projections out of both Caleb Williams and Trevor Lawrence than people realize. Trevor Lawrence has had some solid rushing numbers so far. The reason he hasn't really hit in fantasy is his career high passing TDs is like 25. It's gross, dude. If he just has, maybe he's not going to take that step forward, but he has a vertical profile to his passing. He's willing to take shots.
He takes risks.
25 is his career high pass TDs. Last year, he only had 21. if he just has a 30+ pass TD season, which I'm more or less projecting, the market's projecting the Jags to be a team that scores points. Like they're not. It's an anomaly that he hasn't done it yet, I think, for what his profile is and how good his surrounding cast is, and Doug Peterson's his coach and all of that stuff. He's one of my favorite QBs at QB 15. I'm trying to get more of him on Underdog too. I haven't taken enough of him, but there's a little bit more mobility and a little bit more, I think, upside to his overall profile if the passing side hits in a way that, like, that's one of my concerns with Richardson that we're going to have to talk through, Pat, is like, I don't know if the passing side can hit big enough for him to smash his ADP. I think he'll be fine. Like he said, obviously, like you can see why the profile could really hit. And obviously his rushing is the thing that carries him in a way that not even Lawrence. But the passing side has to come along too. And for Lawrence, like it just hasn't at all yet. If he has a good pass TD season, and we know that stuff bounces around, he's going to be a smash in that range.
I think with Richardson, it's a really well-designed offense. I think Steichen is super sharp. And AD Mitchell, like, reports so far have been extremely exciting. I don't like Pittman at his cost in best ball at all, but he can play. And then I think Josh Downs can play. So,
the tricky thing for me on them on the projections was the market actually has them as a pretty low scoring team overall. And so even when I gave him like rushing TDs, like I had to give Jonathan Taylor some rush TDs. They're not that much different than Jacksonville, to be clear, but I think Jonathan Taylor's more of a threat for like rushing TDs than probably ETN is. Like you get to the overall TD profile, it's like I ended up not being able to project many passing TDs because I was projecting them to be a team that was imbalanced towards rush TDs, if that makes sense.
That does make sense.
And so then you need Indy to like beat market expectation as an offense and overall touchdowns, which you can get, but that's sort of where
I'm willing to bet on that. If you're telling me if I'm betting on Anthony Richardson and that means I'm betting on Indy to beat expectations, I'm good.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Here's a fun little wrinkle of the QB ADP relative to the guys Gretch just highlighted, Lawrence and Caleb going in the 12th. Look at who the two wide receivers you'd be tempted by are in the 9th around all of those other quarterbacks. If you're like, Kyler, Love, Burrow, Jaden Daniels, and Dak, you got Rome and Brian Thomas.
Yeah.
So if you are like, I can't pass on Rome and Brian Thomas, but guess what? Now let's just put their quarterback in our back pocket a couple rounds later.
And those are, Caleb, that's a really nice price on Caleb.
That's a really nice price.
Yeah. So, damn, like 12th round, Caleb stacked with Rome in the 9th. God damn. Damn.
The Caleb thing, I just did my Chicago projection too, and it's like they have a lot of weapons, man. Like they have a lot of good weapons. I'm just like, all of my target projections for everyone in that offense are lower than is reasonable, which is to say that like if someone gets hurt or something, you don't have a floor. Like guys can soak up the other volume. Like I'm projecting Keenan lower than he should be, DJ Moore lower than he should be, Rome Odunze lower than a top 10 receiver should be, Kmet lower than he should be, all the way down. Even like the running backs that earn volume, they have good pass catching backs between Swift and Roschon. It's
Kmet actually really scares me. They keep talking about Gerald Everett.
Right, and Gerald Everett's there and all that stuff. But my point is there's enough there that like if somebody gets hurt, if DJ Moore goes down, okay, well, I can easily project Keenan Allen to do more than I was projecting. I can easily project Odunze to soak some of this up. I can project more 2 tight end sets and both Kmet and Everett actually hit. Like I can't even project Everett for any volume at all. And I do think he's going to be a part of their offense because they have like a lot of depth to their pass game. It's just like a real thing.
Yeah, they do.
Let's this is a good question from Nick talking about the stacking stuff in redraft. I'll just like frame the conversation and then get your guys' thoughts. I think to me there's 2 big benefits. There's the regular season, just simple correlation. Like if Brian Thomas is a smash, man, I think that really increases the chances that Trevor Lawrence has a good year. So just like team level correlation, but then there is the playoff sprint element. Gretch was hinting at it, massively, massively top heavy. The same way you are approaching the sprint contest on Underdog. It's the same thing here with FFPC weeks 15 through 17. There are going to be teams, stack pairings that go off, and it allows you to get less things right, to be concentrated on those offenses, on those pairings. That's kind of how I think about it. So I'm still pretty big stacking, not to the extent we are on Underdog, but I think it's a priority.
I think it's a great point. And I think in the past years, it wasn't as popular, but as we get further along, it's going to trickle into this stuff more, especially with the way that Underdog structures are set up. Like I'm just thinking a few years ago when Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs were the nuts in the sprint. There were some Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs teams around the top. And then there were also some just pure Josh Allen teams and then some pure Stephon Diggs teams. I remember because I had a Stephon Diggs team that year and I didn't have Allen and I wasn't completely blocked. I feel like if that happened this year, you'd be blocked. Because like you also needed Kamara that year and you needed some other dudes. And I think there wasn't enough configurations that had all that. But the tournament's gotten a little bigger. First prize is larger now. And I feel like so some of the past data might even actually say like, well, it hasn't always needed to be a correlation. But to Pete's point, you're getting less things right. And when they hit in a correlated way like that, there's going to be more teams in there that have that is sort of the way that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. I think the biggest difference is that like it's so much more important to just like be trying to find the right players in redraft, in part because when you don't find the right players, it doesn't matter as much. Like if you just whiff, it's not as big of a deal. Obviously, if you draft like tons of busts, your team's going to suck, but like it's about finding those players that are the huge difference makers. And then over the course of the season, cobbling together enough around them. And your draft might not ultimately even be like, look at the Go Bills draft from, the second year they won.
The second year they won. Yeah.
It was it's like half the guys weren't on the team, they had to build it over the course of the year. That's very common for, good redraft teams is that you're continuing to build them post draft. So, in that sense, I think stacking is less important because you should be breaking ties towards the profiles that, you think have a better chance
especially
of
like
those league winners.
The tack on stacks late, which matter in best ball.
Exactly right.
Because they hit your lineup. But in redraft, you're not actually going to go put whoever DJ Chark in. I mean, maybe he could hit in a way that you would if you did. I don't know.
Like we talked about Trevor Lawrence, like Gabe Davis is not especially appealing as a stacking partner in redraft. And partly because guess what, dude? You're dropping Gabe Davis. You're probably dropping Gabe Davis. Maybe, there's certain builds where maybe Gabe Davis is a stacked thing with Trevor Lawrence feels like, okay, man, we need a receiver, sure. But like not a priority to get that. Whereas, if you have Lawrence on a best ball team and you're coming around and you kind of need a receiver and Gabe Davis is there, sure. Like that seems great. It's just a different thing.
Well, and another example.
I was thinking of some actual names to make that point. There's been like Rondell Moore's one I've been doing with Falcon stacks. I would never see a scenario where I could start Rondell Moore in a managed league.
Yeah,
right. Like everything would have to be wrong with Kirk Cousins. Greg Dortch is one I've done with Kyler Murray stuff. I don't think you're like I want to put Greg Dortch in for the stacking element into a managed league. That's probably never happened. No, but that makes sense in best ball.
And the other point I was going to make is you're not forced into the stack like you are with best ball or using the stack, I should say. Like I think an element that would be realistic in the sprint. Say you took Tank Dell and then you got CJ Stroud as a value and you stack those guys up. But say you you crushed your wide receiver decisions and Tank Dell wasn't even in your starting lineup most weeks because he was really volatile. You don't know where to use him. But then you find yourself in the sprint and you are 50 points out. And yes, you have a guy who projects for 3.4 more points than Tank Dell. But CJ Stroud is your quarterback. Tank Dell is going to be low owned, not going to be used by a lot of teams. What is a way for you to climb your way up? You use that correlation, that stack, and the percentage to your advantage. So, like, I think those are the situations where it could really come in handy.
Yeah, give yourself a lever. But to your point, Tank Dell's a class of receiver that can be within like 3 projected points of your starter. You can't do that with and I know you weren't saying this, but I'm just reinforcing like that point doesn't extend to like a Greg Dortch because you'd have to be giving up like 10 points of projected that week. You wouldn't do that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I do think there are some interesting stuff like a Troy Franklin and Bo Nix, who you're probably not even needing to draft, but maybe he's like sort of waiver wire speed dial on Nix. We'll see. We'll kind of see where he's at. I think he could be draftable. But like that would be like, that's a stack that I kind of am interested in because that would be like, a potential path sort of thing, or like
it's a bet on the whole offense.
Bet on the whole offense.
Even a high pick. Yeah.
And Franklin, like Franklin certainly fits a profile of like, I don't know, like he could be nothing. He could be really something. And I like him in best ball because I think there's a good chance he's playing by the end of the year. But I also like him in redraft because if he's totally nothing and I have to cut him, who cares? That doesn't.
The only reason you care is those guys, you sometimes round trip those guys. And then you're like, man, Troy Franklin, week 7 breakout. I wish I didn't have.
I know that's true. Then you do care. Yeah.
What was the round trip? You cut them too early? Is that
Oh,
what
like
you're-
you cut the guy because they're not doing anything, but then they do what you thought they were going to do all along. It
Yeah.
surged toward the end of the season, but you couldn't afford the roster spot.
Yeah.
Right.
But then also the fear of that is why you hold Quentin Johnston too long. It's
Too
It's a
long.
vicious cycle.
It's
Yeah.
tough. It's not easy.
But here's like, let's see. DeMarcus Robinson's going in the 17th round. Xavier Leggette is going in the 16th round.
That's
So,
a
like,
great example.
That's
you
a great
know,
example.
That's
Again,
just
a bet
not
on a
close to me.
on an offense that the market hates to massively overperform, to find this year's
Yeah.
Texans. That's
Yeah.
what the Broncos is. That's what Carolina is. They're two of the three lowest scoring projected offense, and New England would be another great one if you wanted to say, Polk and Drake May and all those guys.
Not really into that one, but I guess I can see it.
I
I'm
actually
impressed that you
used-
didn't pull them out right away.
I know. Trust me, when I said Troy Franklin, I was thinking Polk and May.
I used Polk and Leggette as an example in my piece for Fantasy Life, and I'm really playing with fire because I used on the other side of the coin like the Dontavian Wicks thing, where there's all this hype for him, but he can certainly pop off for spike weeks. But I think it's going to probably be pretty hard to know when to start Dontavian Wicks. But you're going to know, and again, maybe you don't know until later in the season, but like we're going to get real good peaks on, is Polk just the alpha there in New England right out of the gate? And if he is, which is well within the range of outcomes, like boom, you hit on it. And if he's buried and Juju and whoever is playing ahead of him, like, all right, that's
If Juju even makes the roster, I think that should lower Polk's ADP.
But I do think you take those cuts on those guys because that information can be really valuable.
No, 100%. And Wicks would be one of those guys that's, I mean, probably every Packers receiver, like they've talked about how they want to game plan and roll out different kind of stuff every week, and it's not going to be predictable. Like that, it doesn't sound that fun for redraft, even though you don't want to take that too far.
Mac Nova says Chase Claypool round 20 seems like a nice click in July redrafts. I would say that is a good call for that type of play. There's always way more players in that like class of potential than you actually have roster spots for. So you have to be more discerning. It feels like what's the reason not to take him? Well, you're not taking other shots. And so is he the best shot you can take?
Well, yeah. And it's like you also, if we are drafting kind of early, right? We have like 5 or 6 weeks until the season starts. Like who are the late round picks that can really rise? It's generally the running backs, right? Like when you look at these guys here, like take some of these guys like Khalil Herbert or Samaje Perine, like maybe those guys don't have a great outlook now, but they get cut. They sign with the Chiefs. They sign, wherever, somewhere attractive. It's like those guys are moving up 4 rounds and like you can bank that CLV. Whereas I just don't think you're ever getting mega Chase Claypool CLV.
I don't think you are either. I think at best he's sort of rotational. That's what I was thinking. Even if you're going to go to wide receiver, I think I would go to like a Cowboy where like maybe Jalen Tolbert is actually something, or even like draft Ryan Flournoy and say he's going to be this year's Puka. Cause like, then I think if you bank that, you can bank that in a way that's like, he's actually running a ton of routes and in a, obviously Claypool would also be in a good pass game, but I just think the payoff would be different.
Yep. Yeah. I think it'll be fun to talk through because I think a lot of, similar to how we feel on Underdog, like there are a lot of fun ways to build this year. And like, I already just know I do want to have some teams where it's like, oh, maybe we get in a piss boy room and we get a Breece Hall or a Bijan anchor. Like I want to have that team. I want to have a team where we have Achane, I want to have these teams where we have some of these kind of luxury, detour picks early just to build the versions of teams we like to build around those.
Can you pull up the board again?
Yeah.
Because I think the back half of the board has been frustrating in Underdog. And in some ways it has that same frustration where there's just such a clear tier break after AJ Brown, Wilson, and Puka. But it is interesting. Like look at the FFPC is honoring that tier break at wide receiver where on Underdog, we normally just power right through it and take Marvin Harrison. With
exactly.
One of the next picks. Yeah.
And I kind of like that here. Like I would have no problem going like JT Laporta, like at the turn.
Exactly.
And now we're just going to rip it.
I think honoring that tier break out of the 12 is probably the way to play it. Like running back, tight end, start, because like you're going to be okay at receiver. If you could go Neighbors Debo at 3-4,
which you can, according to this.
That's pretty good. You know, I'm not going to be like terrified about my wide receiver room if those are my top two guys. So I think honoring that tier break, which we all feel, you know, but in Underdog, we don't really have the ability to do that because we will fall behind. But here, I think it's much clearer how to play it in the back half of the board.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm getting very excited to get in these.
Yeah, me too. The other nice thing about the back part that started to happen, that's not happening here, that started to happen at Underdog with the rising prices of the round 7 receivers is like if you pick out of the 101, the 6-7 turn, you can still get like it's so nice when you can still get, like, for me at least, to get like Deontay Johnson and JSN at the 6-7 turn, and you're like, I've gotten 7 picks in, and I got both those receivers at the back end of that, whatever detours I took prior. Whereas when you're in the back window, you can't get a receiver at the back of the 7th. The window's closed, so you have to do like you have 6 picks to figure out your receivers.
Yeah.
And this one, because everything's pushed up, JSN's the 8th round pick. Like you get the 7-8 turn is now actually a viable receiver turn.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah. I mean,
I will say
is pretty nice too.
We haven't like fully discussed this, and I know it's not like it's a pretty simple talking point, but like I've been not as high on Deontay Johnson as Gretsch on Underdog, but like holy cow, like Deontay, like on FFPC, when we get boosted to the full point PPR, like I do think some of the excitement of these guys should get ratcheted up. And like comparing a Deontay Johnson to Christian Watson on FFPC, versus Underdog, or even a Keenan, you know, to some of these guys, like I do start to get really excited about that element.
I've also warmed up a bit on Deontay, so yeah, him in the 7th round does feel pretty good.
Pretty stoked to have Deontay on all our teams this year, guys.
Well, and
that's what I'm hearing from both of you is that you're in on Deontay in the 7th round every year.
I'm not like not like super in. I'm just definitely willing to take him.
Yeah, the one spot looks very fun to build out of.
For sure.
There's just so much you can do there.
I mean, honestly, running back tight end looks like a pretty fun start, or wide receiver tight end running back if Achane is in range. But that looks like a very fun start pretty much anywhere.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. The 2-3 tight ends is really similar to the 4-5 in Underdog, where the back draft slots have access to Laporta and Kelsey. The 2-3 turn is just the 4-5 turn. Kincaid Andrews question, right? If you're on the back half and you didn't take one of the earlier tight ends, then you're looking at maybe Pitts and like at the late 3rd, which is like late 5th in Underdog.
5th. Yeah.
And then the 4th, 5th in some ways replaces the receiver choices in the 2-3, where you're getting Devonta and Deebo Samuel and some of those dudes. Stephon Diggs, a 3rd round pick, goes late 4. You know, I mean, T. Higgins is Tank Hill's going late 5. He's a 3rd round
Kittle
pick.
a cheat code? Kittle's going like
it.
4 spots ahead of his Underdog ADP.
Yeah, he went way later in my Scott Fishbowl draft too, and I think people are really concerned about the
zeros or the
I was gonna say the PPR ceiling, the actual catch ceiling, right? Like targets and volume, but like contingent upside on Kittle is massive to me. If either Deebo or Ayuk misses time, like his target projection goes way up. Like he's really good. He's super efficient every year. I mean.
Well, the Evan Ingram Kittle ADPs are telling that exact story. They're saying, give me my 7.5 targets a game. I want to take those to the bank.
Is it really, because Kittle's still going to get 95 to 100 targets. He's not going to get nothing. He's a really good football player.
Right.
So is it really that extra 20 targets or whatever it is it really worth this? And also when we know that there's chaos in season and like the contingent based upside, like
it's chasing the floor. It's
chasing projection. Right. Yeah.
And just being like, I'm going to feel sick to my stomach. Like, yeah, it's cool that week I win with 25 from Kittle, but I don't want to deal with those weeks where he scores 2.5.
And I do think it's possible to punt tight end in this format. I mean, we the first year we went out, Pete, to Vegas, you know, Matt and Mark were this father and son duo that we met out there, and they just like basically didn't draft a tight end. I think they took like one dude in like the 14th or 15th round. They won their league. We did not win our league. They won their league. You know, it's possible to punt.
I mean, you could do Jonnu, Jawan Johnson, maybe a Ben Sinnott in there, get some upside option. Like, you can get 3 or 4 guys in this range and play it.
I also think, and I've been slow to warm up to this. I'm coming around, but I also think that the Rams tight ends, like, I would be totally open to grabbing Parkinson and Davis Allen to close out a draft. 1920. Give me those 2 tight ends. And they're going to play someone. Give someone 75% of the routes, and we're golden.
Same thing with the Chargers. Disley and Hurst. Like, Greg Roman's offense features tight ends. Someone, if they play enough, is certainly possible to be good there.
It will be. That will be an interesting conversation for us from like a portfolio standpoint, because I think there's like 7 or 8 tight ends that we would be excited about drafting in the first 6 rounds. And so just like naturally, like, we're probably always going to be like, yeah, let's grab this tight end here. So it would be like a conscious decision, or maybe you get smacked in the face with 2 really good values at like running back. You get like 2 running back values. It's like, all right, let's go CMC Achane here. Like, this just seems fun. And then you're like, all right, this is going to be the punt, tight end team, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, I mean, I also am open to, you grab CMC Achane, and then your running back 3 is in like round 12, round 13. You like really punt that.
Yep. Well,
that's fun.
That is fun.
We're gonna be talking about this stuff
this is gonna be fun.
A lot more.
That's my big takeaway.
Yeah.
We're about to have a lot of fun.
I know you guys, a lot of you, it's an annual thing we do for the YouTube VIPs. We'll get the videos going with a ship chasing minisode when we hop in our FFPC main event. We'll let you guys know when that gets rolling. And yeah, we're going to get some draft streams scheduled, all that stuff. Like I said, housekeeping stuff, announcements on schedule. The one thing that is locked and loaded, we will be in Vegas that Thursday and Friday, hanging out, watching the games, and we'll organize a ship chasing meetup, all of that good stuff. Gretch, anything else for you in the stealing signals realm?
Nothing major. Just did a YouTube stream yesterday. It was a long one, but I think it hit on a lot of good topics. The projection pods with Leone finishing. I have like 6 teams left to finish all my projections, and then I'm going to be able to start writing up some content over on the newsletter behind that, but just still plugging away at spreadsheets on the projections.
Beautiful. Gretch, what's going on? Or Pat, what's going on with Leg Up?
So I just put out an article. It went live yesterday morning. Just a quick read on some ADPs that I'm afraid of losing as things get shaken up due to training camp. In some cases, it's guys that I'm like not hammering right now, but then I'm worried they're going to rise and I'm going to wish that I did hammer them, or some stacks that I think are just super fun right now that are priorities for me. So check that out on Legendary Upside. I did a podcast with Eric Froton today on the college football, the best bowl mania that Underdog just launched. So it was very fun. I know nothing about the college football scene really. So very fun to kind of get a sense of structurally how to build there. You got to think about bye weeks a lot. And just get like a little taste of what the player pool is like over there. So check that out. That's we just recorded that right before this. That'll be up later today or early tomorrow.
Awesome. Yep. My other show tonight, I got Neil Orfield on the randomizer tonight. The wheel is locked and ready to go. That'll be a very fun show. Tomorrow, special one-off stream on my YouTube. We're doing the world's fastest slow draft part 2. Going to try to set our world record or break our world record from last year. And then Best Ball After Dark is Friday night. I'm having Michael Cheng on. He is a data scientist who just did a ton of deep dive into the weekly winners data. So if you're kind of interested in that format, he's going to walk me through all of his research and some of his takeaways for that. And then we'll do a weekly winners draft. Otherwise, we'll be back next week at our normal time, and keep your eye out for all of our announcements with our August schedule. Thanks again to Nick in the hopper here helping us produce. Thank you guys for accommodating this early start, and we'll catch you guys in the Discord. For Pat, for Gretch, I'm Pete. We'll see you guys next time.